Welcome to the Explainer, guys. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're stripping away the sterile, dusty religious plating that we usually associate with ancient texts, and instead we're diving headfirst into a document that serves as a raw, unfiltered masterclass in the bystander effect, the total failure of complex political alliances, and the devastating mechanics of absolute betrayal. Today, we are looking at the Book of Obadiah.
I want you to just picture this scenario for a second. Imagine your house is burning down. You look out the living room window, through the smoke, and your own brother is standing right there on the front lawn. But he isn't calling for help, he's not grabbing a hose, he's just watching. Actually, it's worse than that, he's laughing. And then, as you finally manage to break down the door to escape the flames, he tackles you to the ground and just hands you straight over to the arsonist. It is the absolute ultimate betrayal. Well, this incredibly dark, highly visceral scenario is exactly what we are going to unpack today.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, Sibling Betrayal, the Ultimate Betrayal.
Okay, let's look at the timeline here. See that number, 600? That represents a massive 600-year window. Scholars actually really struggle to date the Book of Obadiah, and they give it this super elastic dating window somewhere between 927 BC and 330 BC. And you know what that tells us? It tells us this isn't just some spontaneous one-off diary entry. It's a living document capturing a deep, generational trauma that literally defied a single pinpoint in time. Now, what we do know for sure is that the core message centers around the traumatic backdrop of 586 BC. That was the year the Babylonian Empire utterly leveled Jerusalem. And this massive grievance? It's all built on a family dynamic. We're talking about the ancient, millennia-long sibling rivalry between Jacob and Esau, which eventually calcified into the brutal foreign policy of two neighboring nations, Judah and Edom.
Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. It's the framework of ancient cosmic justice that this reveals. Obadiah aims absolute fury at Edom, the neighboring nation, even though Babylon is the actual empire swinging the wrecking ball. So why are they so mad at Edom? Well, look at the comparison. Babylon was an empire, right? They were acting exactly how empires acted back then. Brutal imperial expansion. The violence was completely expected. But Edom was family. They broke an assumed covenant of brotherhood. The authors viewed the moral failure of a brother turning a blind eye and actually rejoicing over your suffering as infinitely more corrosive to the human soul than the completely predictable violence of a conquering empire.
Moving right along to Section 2, Fatal Blind Spots, the Illusion of Invincibility.
Let's see how this arrogance builds. You see, Edom's sheer, unchecked arrogance was deeply tied to their geography. They lived in Petra. If you've never seen it, it's this absolutely stunning mountain stronghold carved right into the canyons of modern-day Jordan. Literally, a handful of men could hold off an entire army in those narrow passes. Because of this, they developed a profound, fatal illusion that they were completely untouchable. But Obadiah calls out this exact psychological blind spot, declaring, "Even if you ascend as high as the eagle and set your nest among the stars, I will bring you down." Wow. It's that timeless truth hitting hard. Pride always comes before the fall.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates a concept we see all the time today. Think about a wildly arrogant tech monopoly right now. The kind that is so insanely sure its proprietary software is unhackable that it completely ignores insider threats. Or, think of the Titanic. When a society believes its physical infrastructure makes it totally immune to disaster, it just stops maintaining its moral or operational vigilance. Edom's physical fortress was genuinely formidable, absolutely, but it stunted their ethical development. They felt so perfectly safe from foreign armies that they completely forgot they weren't safe from the consequences of their own ethical decay.
So, how do you destroy an unsinkable fortress? Well, it has to be an inside job. Think about ordinary thieves for a second. They usually break in, take only what they need, and run, right? But Edom's ruin wouldn't be a standard raid. It would be a meticulous, total societal strip mining. And the craziest part? It wouldn't be executed by a foreign army scaling their massive cliffs. It would be done by their own self-serving allies. There was this famous wisdom from their region, Timon, which was known for its Machiavellian statecraft and diplomatic alliances. But it was entirely built on mutual exploitation, with zero moral grounding. So when the geopolitical wind shifted, those self-serving allies realized, hey, it's actually more profitable to cannibalize Edom than to protect it. Their own so-called wisdom became a total trap.
Which brings us to Section 3, Anatomy of Complicity, the bystander effect.
Okay, the absolute crucial point here is understanding the timeline of their complicity during the actual fall of Jerusalem. We aren't just talking about a vague attitude of superiority. The text outlines a chilling, step-by-step progression of the bystander effect. Step 1, stand aloof. They just watch the slaughter with this cold detachment, rationalizing their apathy. But here's the thing. To justify apathy, you have to dehumanize the victim. Which leads right to step 2, rejoice and mock. Because once you mock them, exploiting their tragedy suddenly feels like a right. Then, step 3, they actively entered the burning gates to loot the place. And finally, step 4, they stood at the crossroads to capture fleeing refugees, actively handing them over to the Babylonian death squads. It escalated terrifyingly fast from passive omission to active, hands-on atrocity.
Because of this incredibly deep moral rot, the text shifts towards a standard of perfect, brutal, cosmic justice, reciprocal justice. Simply put, as you have done, it shall be done to you. The exact methods Edom used to exploit others, betrayal by her allies, the plundering of wealth, that would become the exact mechanism of their own undoing.
And this brings us to a really stark contrast in historical outcomes. The text frames the house of Jacob, Judah, as a fire, and the house of Esau, Edom, as stubble. While Israel's devastating destruction by Babylon was categorized as severe discipline, like a purification meant to eventually prepare them for a restored society, Edom's fate was entirely different. Stubble doesn't get purified, guys. It gets consumed. Edom was marked and destined to be completely erased.
Let's look at exactly how that happened in Section 4, the erasure of Edom, fading into history.
You know, societies rarely vanish overnight in a single cinematic fiery explosion. It doesn't really work like that. This timeline actually shows the slow, grinding mechanism of historical absorption. First, right following the Babylonian era, the Edomites were literally pushed out of their impenetrable fortress in Petra by other nomadic groups. So they lost their geographic anchor right off the bat, and they migrated into southern Judea. Then, by the Maccabean era, they were forcibly assimilated by the Jewish Hasmonean dynasty, losing their distinct national identity piece by piece. By the 1st century, their most famous descendant was the Roman-installed King Herod the Great. But then, after the disastrous Jewish-Roman War and the final destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, their political structures were just completely shattered. The remaining population was totally absorbed into the surrounding Arab and Jewish populations. Their culture, their language, their entire ethnic identity, it was all just swallowed up entirely by the noise of history.
So what does this mean for us? Section 5, the timeless warring, modern takeaways. Zooming out from all the ancient geopolitics, the modern takeaways here are honestly chillingly relevant. First off, a fortress is only as strong as its internal integrity. Building a massive moat of wealth or technology or geographic isolation, it just creates a lethal blind spot if your foundation is built purely on pride. Second, selfish networks will inevitably turn on you. If mutual exploitation is literally the only thing binding your alliances together, they're going to cannibalize you the very second it becomes profitable. And finally, the passive bystander participates in their own human rot. Watching a tragedy unfold and rationalizing your inaction, that is just the first step toward becoming a full participant in the evil itself.
Now here's a number that is just totally staggering to me. 21. All of this, every bit of this massive geopolitical and psychological breakdown comes from a document that is only 21 verses long. The Book of Obadiah is incredibly dense. But, you know, it doesn't end on a note of pure doom and gloom. It actually concludes with a promise of overarching universal sovereignty. It was a clear declaration to the original readers that human history isn't just some random, chaotic series of violent collisions. There is a higher justice at play, ensuring that cruelty ultimately has an expiration date.
I really want to leave you with one final, provocative thought today, based purely on the mechanics of how Edom actually vanished. Remember, they weren't just conquered, they were swept away, assimilated, and completely forgotten. If a society, or a corporation, or hey, even an individual, builds their entire identity on self-reliance, untouchable pride, and the active downfall of others, do they just face external punishment, or does the universe actually structure itself in such a way that they just hollow themselves out, fading entirely into the noise of history until there is absolutely nothing left to remember? It's a heavy question, but it's for sure one we all need to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.